From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika has handed in his resignation after weeks of mass protests calling on him to step down. On Monday, Bouteflika said he would resign before April 28th. In March, the head of the Algerian army called on the 82-year-old to be declared unfit, citing Article 102 of the Constitution. The president has rarely appeared in public since he suffered a stroke 6 years ago. But even after Bouteflika announced he would resign, Algerians remained. They are now calling on the entire government to leave. People continue urging authorities to let them choose their leaders through fair and free elections. Before turning in his resignation, Bouteflika announced a 27-member cabinet to rule the country until a new president is chosen.
The resignation of the president does not offer anything to the people. We want things to happen on the ground. The people want something tangible. The people want Article 70 of the Constitution, which states that people are the source of all power.
Colombian activist Deiner Seferino Yunda Camayo has been shot dead by police during a protest, according to the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia. Riot police heavily repressed participants of the social minga in the department of Valle del Cauca, also leaving several injured. Witnesses said the activist died right away after he was shot on the chest. Tuesday marks the 24th day of protests by indigenous, campesino, and Afro descendants who demand that the government fulfill agreements regarding their lands and rights. The dialogue between communities and the government was called off yesterday, as the protesters say the government has not agreed to certain guarantees. But a different dialogue table is set to restart talks in a different city. A group of Colombian citizens is sending their support to the indigenous people, Afro-descendant and campesinos currently engaged in a social minga as they march from Paris towards The Hague in the Netherlands in protest of the killings of activists in their home country.
We are in Brussels. The group has come from Paris and we are heading towards The Hague to speak out against the murder of social leaders. We want to send our support to everyone participating in the social minga, for them to know we support you in every step.
It has been over 3 weeks since the start of the protest by indigenous communities and campesinos. Let's find out more about the Minga social and its demands.
With just their traditional batons in their hands, these indigenous people in La Delfina in Valle de Cauca have been protesting in defense of life, land and peace. The baton symbolizes their oath to defend their territory and their people. Angered by the presence of the armed forces in the areas inhabited by indigenous people, campesinos and Afro-Colombians, and the constant neglect of their demands, these people decided to put pressure on the government by blocking the Pan-American highway between La Maria and La Agustina in the southwest of Colombia.
It
is worrying that the national government does not show a gesture of willingness to meet with campesinos. And we are concerned about the fact that there might be a stronger confrontation than those we have had these past few days.
The protests soon spread to 9 departments across Colombia. They call it the Minga, after the traditional collective action of indigenous communities. More than 30,000 people from about 500 organizations have joined this Minga since it was launched on March 10th. The main demand of the protesters is that the government comply with the agreements reached with the indigenous people since 1991 and guaranteed by Article 286 of the Constitution. They want their human rights be protected and their social and economic rights to be guaranteed. They also want the full implementation of the 2016 peace accord signed between the government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, the FARC. But instead of listening to their rising voices, the government responded with a heavy hand. In the police repression, over a dozen protesters have been injured.
The state always wants to clear their hands, and we know the state is going to manipulate public opinion. If something happens during a demonstration, the state is responsible because we are exercising our rights. The state is to blame if a comrade is killed. We are campesinos. We don't know how to deal with explosives. They cover their attacks against us to stigmatize the indigenous struggle.
The organization of Mingas is not new in the country. Since 1999, the indigenous people and campesinos have been fighting hard for their right to their ancestral land and their social rights. Their demands have fallen on the deaf ears of various governments. In 2006, more than 18,000 indigenous people and peasants protested to reject the free trade agreement with the United States and the re-election of Álvaro Uribe. In 2008, the protests lasted for 2 months and over 5,000 people marched to the capital, Bogota. In 2014, the indigenous people signed agreements with the government of Juan Manuel Santos. But what triggered these recent protests is the rise in the killing of indigenous leaders in Colombia since Iván Duque took the office of president in August 2018. Since then, more than 60 social leaders have been killed in the country. The marchers have been asking Duque to meet them and comply with the agreements reached with the previous governments. So far, no positive step has been taken by the government to correct what the protesters say is the historic neglect of the state.
Indigenous organizations in Honduras are marching towards Tegucigalpa to demand the government stop destroying their forest. The mobilization started in La Esperanza, located over 150 kilometers north of the capital, under the banner of Justice, Land, Respect, and Food for Our People. Among their demands is their liberation of political prisoners and an end to the persecution of the Lenca people. They are also condemning the government of Juan Orlando Hernández for supporting the coup attempts in Venezuela and for sending so-called humanitarian aid, while his own people suffer from hunger and violence. The recovery of electricity continues in Venezuela. The metro in the capital, Caracas, is up and running as service resumes. The Los Teques metro system is also working again, as well as state railways. Working on restoring power throughout the country has been constant since attacks began on the electricity grid. All schools in Venezuela will reopen on Wednesday. President Nicolás Maduro made the announcement on Twitter while asking students to go back to classes and to continue resisting. He also called on the people of Venezuela to let everyone know that they will triumph over the difficult situation the country is facing. Schools across Venezuela had been closed because of the most recent attacks on the country's power grid. Throughout Venezuela, contingency plans set up by the government are active to guarantee access to food and water for all citizens. Despite the difficulties following several attacks against the country's services, people continue to resist.
Various designated areas to refuel water tankers are available across Caracas. From early in the morning, regular citizens, along with members of the armed forces, organized to distribute water to various communities. The main goal of this plan is to provide water for all citizens.
We are resisting in our own way. President Maduro, the people of La Cementera are with you. Neither the imperialist lackeys, nor Donald Trump, nor that Guaidó will win. We have a president, and his name is Nicolás.
The terrorist attacks against Venezuela's power grid, orchestrated by the international right wing and which sought to leave the country in the dark for a long time, are confronted with the people's resilience.
Right now, we need to save electricity. We can't waste any more energy. We know water will come. We know this will be fixed. What we must focus on now is on moving forward. That's all we can do.
Women led the resistance in these communities, along with their children. They stand against violence and demand peace.
Yesterday, some people were burning trees. Why are they attacking nature now? We will continue standing here. We will not allow the violent opposition to enter here.
Teamwork and social equality is made more and more visible as foreign intervention continues to intensify. Citizens condemn being victims of a violent opposition that wants to take power by any means necessary.
Guyana's President David Granger has accepted the resignation of all coalition members of parliament that are holders of dual citizenship. A statement was made saying these members will not be returning to parliament when it reconvenes on April 11th. The decision comes on the heels of the no-confidence motion brought against the government, which was passed on December 2018 and later overturned by the appeal court on March 22nd. The motion is believed to be on the basis of Article 155 of Guyana's constitution, prohibiting persons with dual citizenship from contesting parliamentary elections. Mexican authorities have rescued more than 330 Central American migrants who were being transported in buses in the state of Chiapas. 15 people were arrested for alleged human trafficking, Mexican authorities confirmed. The migrants coming from countries such as Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua were giving medical and psychological care. There were 157 minors in the group. Thousands of Palestinians joined the funeral procession of 23-year-old Muhammad Ali Dar Aswan, who was killed by Israeli security forces. The Palestinian Health Ministry said Dar Aswan lived in the Kalandia refugee camp. Israeli forces raided a number of homes across the West Bank during the night, including that camp. Mourners in the procession were heard singing anti-Israeli slogans as the Israeli army threw tear gas towards the procession.
Around dawn, everyone heard heavy gunshots when people moved to see what is happening. We heard Israeli soldiers have been at the scene. There are some injuries, and they arrested 5 members of the same family at Kalandia refugee camp. They are living at the main Ramallah Jerusalem street.
We'll take a short break now. Join us in a few. Welcome back. Former Chief Prosecutor Thelma Aldana will not be allowed to run for Guatemala's presidential elections. Our correspondent Mario Rosales from Guatemala City explains.
Guatemala's top electoral court has rejected the candidacy of former Chief Prosecutor Thelma Aldana for the upcoming presidential elections on June 16th. This comes as the court accepted 3 challenges to her candidacy. After the decision was made, Aldana, member of the Seed Movement Party, took to Twitter to announce that she will appeal the ruling at the highest authority in the country. She is free to appeal the decision. However, she faces 2 major issues. One is that there is not much time until the election, and the second is that she is out of the country, since there is a detention order against her. Some analysts say there are very powerful secret groups behind the prevention of her candidacy. It is suspected that this is because during her time as chief prosecutor, she brought corruption charges against many people. Even though she's also accused of corruption, her case will likely go to the Constitutional Court, which will have the final say.
We thank Mario for that report. Relatives of the victims of the Uruguayan dictatorship have supported the president's decision of dismissing the heads of the armed forces. In an official statement, an organization created by relatives of the victims said that they trust the Senate to properly act against those responsible. The defense minister and the head of the armed forces were dismissed after it was discovered they hid information about the murder of a man who was part of the Marxist Tupamaro movement during the dictatorship.
Shortly after the conclusion of the daily ministerial cabinet meeting on Monday, the Uruguayan president announced his decision to dismiss all the heads of the defense ministry and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Jose González. González was only in the position for 12 days before he was fired. When assuming the position, he had promised to improve the armed forces.
I accept the position. The National Army has reached high levels of professionalism. Now that I'm in charge, we need to continue with a maximum commitment when we fulfill our mission and activities.
President's decision came hours after the Military Court of Honor released the report on its investigation into the actions of former military officers Jorge Silveira, Ernesto Ramas, Gilberto Vasquez, Luis Maurente and Jose Niño Gavazzo. During the investigation, Gavazzo admitted that he threw the body of Roberto Gomensoro, who was part of the Tupamaro movement, into a river. Gomensoro was arrested and tortured to death in March 1973 during the dictatorship.
What happened for the first time over the weekend is that they openly admitted that they were involved in the kidnapping of people, the disappearance of people, and murder of people. And this happened in a direct way not only as chiefs, but they show pride in their first-hand participation.
The Court of Honor was formed by 3 former high military officers. According to court reports, former military official Jorge Silveira said Gavazzo was also responsible for the murder of another detainee and for the disappearance of Maria Claudia Garcia de Gelman, mother of Macarena Gelman, a human rights activist. Her mother was kidnapped and killed during the dictatorship.
I think this is the right decision. We can choose to ponder on how we came into this situation, or we can decide to change in order to have a proper armed forces and not the one we have, which in many ways is still linked to what happened during the dictatorship.
Confessions made at the Court of Honor should have been sent to the judiciary, but that didn't happen. Instead, the public prosecutor Jorge Diaz sent Gavazzo's confession to a civil court. According to human rights defender and lawmaker Macarena Gelman, the investigation must continue.
It is time to think about this seriously. I don't think people were unwilling, but I think we have to make an extra effort to have armed forces that are no longer linked to the dictatorship because they had a key role during that time.
It's still not known who will replace the defence minister, although there are some names being thrown around, such as Jose Bayardi, who already held the position during the first administration of President Tabaré Vázquez.
Argentina is commemorating the 36th anniversary of the beginning of the Malvinas War, waged between Argentina and the UK. Operation Rosario began on April 2nd, 1982. It was a military move planning the expulsion of the British occupation of the Malvinas Islands after 149 years. It began a war that would last 74 days and in which 649 Argentine soldiers died. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, gives us more details about the events taking place in Argentina.
Hundreds of acts are taking place across the whole country to commemorate the Day of Veterans and the fallen during the war in 1982. Many vigils took place in different places in Argentina, especially in the south, in Rio Grande City, close to the Malvinas Islands, which marked the beginning of the activities organized by ex-combatants. Specifically, they want to remember that moment in which their dead fought for the Malvinas cause, but also in complex and hard present in which President Macri is trying to change government policies related to Malvinas, giving in to all the UK conditions and demands, failing not only to claim Argentine sovereignty over the islands, but also over more than 3 million kilometers squared of the Southern Sea, which is full of goods, food, and energy reserves. In this framework, the demonstrations are taking place in a very complex situation, with a government that is relinquishing claims to Malvinas, but also in the struggle over memory, truth, and sovereignty of the Malvinas Islands.
We thank Edgardo for that report. More than 1,000 cases of cholera and 2,700 cases of acute diarrhea have been confirmed in Mozambique. According to the World Health Organization, oral cholera vaccines are expected to arrive by Tuesday. The campaign is expected to start on Wednesday. Cyclone Idai nearly destroyed the city of Beira, causing catastrophic flooding and killing more than 400 people in Mozambique.
Nearly more important than responding to cholera is to prevent cholera. Water and sanitation is key to this. Access to safe water cannot be stressed high enough. And once a person is sick, accessing treatment as quick as possible is of most importance. It's a sad fact to remind everyone, the young and the frail and the old, children especially, if they catch cholera in the morning, they could be dead in the evening, if not treated.
Meanwhile, Chinese aid workers have disinfected cyclone-affected areas to curb the cholera outbreak. Medical aid workers disinfected dozens of rooms in 16 cholera-infected homes as they strive to halt the outbreak.
We can cut off the transmission routes and protect the families of the cholera patients by disinfecting their living quarters, food, objects, and daily supplies that they've been exposed to.
The governor of Samburu County in Kenya has been arrested over a fuel supply scandal, accused of pocketing more than $800,000. Moses Kasaini has been charged with conspiracy to commit economic crimes, abuse of power, and conflict of interest. The governor had allegedly been selling fuel to the county government through Oryx service station since 2013 without disclosing his connections to the company. Kasaini and his lawyers have not commented on the case. Senegalese President Macky Sall has been sworn in for a second term at a ceremony in Diamandillo. Sall emerged winner of the elections held on February 24th, beating 4 other aspirants with 58% of the votes. On March 6th, the Constitutional Court announced his victory at the polls. Sall's opponents rejected the results but said they were not going to contest it. Several African leaders attended the ceremony. In Ivory Coast, the port of Abidjan in West Africa has embarked on a vast modernization project of its facilities to maintain its position and compete regionally. Abidjan port will now be able to receive all size conventional container ships with a 16-meter draft. This new configuration will also help reduce waiting times and enhance the productivity of the port. About $1.4 billion are expected to be invested by the upgrade by 2020. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. UK Prime Minister Theresa May has announced her government will seek to further delay Brexit. May will also meet with the opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn in an attempt to break the impasse in Parliament.
I know there are some who are so fed up with delay and endless arguments that they would like to leave with no deal next week. I've always been clear that we could make a success of no deal in the long term, but leaving with a deal is the best solution. So we will need a further extension of Article 50, one that is as short as possible and which ends when we pass a deal. And we need to be clear what such an extension is for, to ensure we leave in a timely and orderly way.
The Iranian government has ordered 70 villages to be evacuated in Khuzestan due to a risk of floods. At least 47 people have died in flash floods in northern and southern Iran over the past 2 weeks, and thousands have been displaced. Floods have affected at least 26 out of Iran's 31 provinces since heavy downpours began in March. The government has since announced a state of emergency. A fire that engulfed around 15 hectares of forest in southwest China's Sichuan province has been contained. Local authorities dispatched more than 600 people to quench the blaze, which broke out at around 6 p.m. local time on Saturday at a remote spot. 27 firefighters and 3 locals lost their lives while fighting the fire. The National Meteorological Center forecasts that rains are expected in the region, which is helpful to the rescue efforts. The funeral for the late cinema legend Agnes Varda has been held in Paris. Family, fans, and artists from around the world gathered at the Montparnasse Cemetery to say their goodbyes. The only female filmmaker to come out of the highly influential French New Wave during the 60s, Agnes Varda was one of the most respected voices in the world of film. She passed away on March 29th at the age of 90.
She is one of the great creators of the 20th century, one of the greatest filmmakers. She did it all with small means, because women have never had big budgets to make films. She did it all with the many constraints. For example, she made Cleo from 5 to 7 in real time. She is one of the greatest creators of all time.
We'll remember her as the greatest female filmmaker in the history of cinema, at a time when everyone knows that there aren't enough of them, and when women's voices, which are becoming more numerous, but not fast enough, need to come through, and lots are starting to come through thanks to her.
We've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.